Hello, my friend. Welcome to Dreamy Nights. A quiet corner of the evening has opened just for this moment, and it is a gentle joy to share it together. Tonight, a soft Parisian rain will drift across a balcony high above the cobbled streets, and each breath, each raindrop will lead a little closer to rest. So let the day grow distant, like lights fading across the river, and allow the night to cradle every thought in calm. When the heart feels ready, the story begins to unfold. Before the first scene arrives, a small whisper of gratitude. If these quiet nights bring comfort, a gentle subscription can become a lantern waiting in the dark, always ready to be lit again. No pressure, no hurry, only a soft invitation to return whenever peace is needed. Thank you simply for being here. Mao Archer, across the rooftops of Paris evening, settles with a tender, unhurried grace. The sky once bright with the last pale smear of afternoon now carries the deep blue of approaching night brushed with faint lavender at the edges. The first city lights bloom one by one, small constellations behind glass, as apartments awaken into their own private galaxies of warmth. A faint mist hangs in the air, cooling the stones and tiles, softening every line and sound. On a narrow street, halfway up the side of a graceful old building, a balcony waits. Its wrought iron railing curls into delicate patterns, each twist and spiral worn smooth by seasons of sun and rain. Tiny leaves from climbing ivy rest along the metal still and patient. The balcony floor, paved with pale, weathered tiles, holds a small table and a single chair, their wooden slats polished by touch and time. The balcony doors stand open, inviting the evening inside. They frame the city like a gentle painting rooftops in shades of slate and clay. A ribbon of street lamps stretching into the distance, and a slice of sky changing color with every passing breath. From somewhere below, the soft murmur of conversation rises through the air, merging with the distant hum of traffic and the faint clinking of glasses from a nearby cafe. All of it blends into a low, soothing chorus, never intrusive, simply there, like a background lullaby to the coming night. Within the apartment, just beyond the doorway, a small lamp casts a pool of amber light. Its shade is made of frosted glass, the pattern of leaves and vines traced faintly across its surface. The warm glow spills across a wooden floor, touches the edges of a stack of books, and paints gold along the frame of a watercolor hanging on the wall. The air smells of paper-polished wood and a hint of jasmine from a tiny vase of flowers on the table. The room and the balcony breathe together inside and outside, warmth and coolness held in a gentle balance. A figure moves slowly into the lamplight, though no sharp details call attention to identity or story. Only the unhurried presence matters here, a quiet inhabitant of this sanctuary, someone who has known busy days and now leans toward stillness. Bare feet make almost no sound on the wooden floor. Fingers brush the edge of the table, the curve of the chair, learning again the contours of this familiar refuge. The figure pauses at the balcony doors, feeling the cool kiss of air on skin. The linen curtains lift and fall with the breeze, like slow, pale waves. They whisper against the doorway, their texture soft and slightly rough at once, carrying the faint scent of detergent and sun from earlier in the afternoon. The city outside feels both near and safely distant, like a story told in another room. Then, almost imperceptibly at first, the rain begins. It arrives as a single soft tap on the metal railing, then another on the slate of a nearby roof. A third lands against the glass of the balcony door, leaving a small, perfect bead of water that slowly slides downward. The sound is hesitant and delicate, like a musician testing the first notes of a lullaby. Within a few quiet breaths, the pattern deepens. A gentle patter spreads across the rooftops, dusting the chimneys and skylights with 1,000 tiny touches. The street below gathers the water in shallow, gleaming puddles that catch the reflection of the lamps. Cars move more slowly now, their tires humming over the wet stones, leaving silver trails in their wake. The city's usual rhythm softens its sharp edges, rounded by the curtain of rain. On the balcony, the air grows cooler, carrying the unmistakable fragrance of wet stone and freshened air. The ivy leaves darken as they drink in the moisture, shining softly in the lamplight. Raindrops gather along the iron railing like a row of small pearls, each one trembling in place before falling to the tiles below with the gentlest tap. The figure steps closer to the threshold, resting a hand on the side of the doorway. The wood feels smooth beneath the fingers, warmed by years of touch and softened by age. A slow breath fills the chest, taking in the smell of rain as it blends with the faint jasmine from inside. Somewhere far away, a bell chimes the hour, its tone muted and velvety as it threads through the steady patter of water. On the small balcony table, a simple ceramic cup waits its surface, still faintly warm from freshly poured tea. Wisps of steam rise from it, curling in delicate spirals that drift toward the open air. The scent of the tea is gentle and comforting, perhaps a blend of chamomile and a hint of honey, floral and sweet in equal measure. Fingers encircle the cup, feeling the smooth glaze and the soft warmth seeping into the palms, anchoring the moment in touch and temperature. The figure lifts the cup just slightly, not even to drink yet, but to savor the closeness of the warmth. The contrast between the cool breeze crossing the balcony and the heat held in ceramic becomes a quiet conversation of its own, outside and inside chill and comfort, rain and glow. The linen curtain brushes lightly against the figure's arm, leaving a faint whispering caress. It stirs again as the wind shifts, drawing in another breath of night air. Beyond the balcony, the sky has deepened into a rich navy, and the rain has settled into its own confident rhythm. It falls in countless thin threads, almost invisible against the dark. Yet each drop sings softly as it meets tile glass and stone. The apartment behind remains a pool of warmth. Shadows stretch gently along the floor, softened by the lamp's steady glow. The books on the table, the watercolor on the wall, the neat folds of a blanket resting over the back of a chair, all share in the same patient stillness. Nothing demands attention. Nothing insists on being done. The room exists simply to hold this moment of quiet like cupped hands, protecting a small, steady flame. Dead, standing at the threshold, the figure lets the eyes linger on the city. Window by window, the buildings reveal glimpses of other lives. Someone closing curtains with a practiced motion. Another leaning over a balcony to rescue a potted plant from the rain. A small cat curling up on a windowsill. Each scene is framed by the same soft glow of lamplight. Each one a private world, wrapped in its own kind of peace. The rain blurs the view just enough to make everything feel dreamlike. Light from distant street lamps diffuses into halos glowing gold in the mist. The outlines of chimneys and rooftops soften more suggestion than structure. Every surface that once seemed solid and defined now appears gently washed like a watercolor painting whose colors have bled into each other in harmonious tones. The figure takes a slow sip of tea at last. The warmth invites the shoulders to release the jaw, to loosen the breath, to lengthen. The taste is simple, familiar, and kind. With each sip, the cup grows a little cooler to the touch, mirroring the gradual settling of thought and sensation. Outside, the rain continues its patient song, a steady, even murmur that asks nothing and offers only calm. Time loses its sharpness here. Minutes are no longer counted by tasks or obligations, but by the slow changes in the sky, the way the steam from the tea thins and disappears, the deepening sheen of water on the tiles. The world beyond the balcony keeps moving, yet from this vantage point, it seems to move in softened slow motion, as though wrapped in a gentle layer of clouds. The figure rests one hand lightly on the balcony railing, feeling the cool metal beneath the damp fingertips. Droplets gather and slide away, leaving small trails that catch the lamplight. The sensation of coolness on skin, the faint roughness of iron, the scent of rain and tea mingling in the air. Everything combines to create an intimate, protective cocoon. In this high, narrow pocket of the city, the rain is not an interruption, but a blessing. It hushes the streets, dims the noise, and drapes the evening in a soft, shimmering veil. It clears the air, washing away the dust and heat left behind by the day. As it falls, the city itself seems to sigh, settling into a quieter, slower rhythm. Inside the apartment, the lamp continues to glow unwavering and gentle. Its light touches the edges of the balcony, joining the silver of the rain and the navy of the sky in a quiet harmony of colors. The figure stands between these worlds, warmth behind coolness, before held safely inside this small sanctuary suspended above the city. The rain shows no sign of hurrying. It falls and falls and falls with patient devotion like a soft, endless refrain. In its unchanging rhythm, there is a promise that for this night at least, the world can remain as it is simple, gentle, and at rest. In this promise, the balcony becomes more than a physical place. It becomes a pause in time, a breath held between heartbeats, a space where the day loosens its grip and night opens its arms. The figure wrapped in the sound of rain and the glow of lamplight leans quietly into that pause, allowing the moment to stretch and soften until even thought begins to dissolve. The Parisian evening continues to deepen, and the sleep sanctuary above the street settles more firmly into stillness, ready to drift with the rain toward even deeper rest in the hours to come. Outside, the rain had fully claimed the night. What had begun as a tentative tapping now flowed in a soft, continuous curtain across the rooftops, threading the city together with its silver strands. The Parisian sky, once streaked with the last colors of dusk, lay deep and velvety overhead, its darkness warmed by the glow of countless windows. The balcony still waited, a small, suspended world of iron and stone, listening to the rain. Inside, the lamp's amber light continued to spill across the room, forming a gentle boundary between the world within and the cool night beyond. The figure lingered near the doorway, fingers resting lightly on the frame. The faint warmth of the wood met the coolness of the air, a quiet contrast that called attention not to thought, but to simple sensation. The steam from the teacup had thinned now, rising in almost invisible wisps that dissolved quickly into the dimness. The rain's voice had become more confident. Tiny rivulets traced paths down the glass of the balcony doors, joining and separating in slow, meandering lines. A thin mist hovered above the street, catching the reflections of street lamps and passing headlights, turning each into a soft blur of gold and white. The sound was everywhere, in the gentle drumming on the awning above the delicate patter on the ivy leaves, the muffled splashes where drops met the shallow puddles on the tiles. Each note was small, yet together they formed a continuous, soothing melody. The figure moved with unhurried grace, stepping back into the room for a moment. Bare feet met the wooden floor with the softest of sounds. A folded blanket resting over the back of the nearby chair waited like a patient cloud of warmth. Fingers slipped beneath its edge, feeling the plushness of the fabric, the way it yielded gently to touch. The blanket smelled faintly of line-dried cotton and the lingering echo of a floral detergent, a familiar, comforting scent. With slow, deliberate movements, the blanket was lifted and draped over one arm. The fabric's weight was reassuring, neither heavy nor too light, simply present. Each fold fell naturally into place, cascading in soft lines. Carrying it toward the balcony chair, the figure stepped once more into the frame of the open doors where the cool breath of the rainy night met the blanket's stored warmth. The contrast was like a quiet conversation between the world outside and the small sanctuary within. The chair on the balcony waited simple and inviting. Its wooden slats, warmed by years of sunlight and polished by touch, were beaded now with tiny droplets that the awning had not quite managed to shield. The figure reached for a small cloth lying folded on the table, a piece of plain soft cotton kept for moments just like this. Carefully, the cloth was unfolded, revealing its faint creases. Fingers pressed it gently to the surface of the chair, guiding it along each slat. The droplets clung for a moment, then surrendered, disappearing into the fabric. The wood beneath emerged slightly darker, its grain more pronounced in the low light. The motion repeated, slow and attentive, each pass of the cloth smoothing away the last traces of dampness. The sound was subtle, a whisper of fabric against wood, the soft shifting of feet on the tiles, the rain's steady murmur beyond. Every movement felt deliberate, free of rush or expectation. It was less a task to complete and more a ritual of care, a quiet conversation with the space itself. Once the chair was dry, the blanket was unfolded, its folds easing out like a breath released. It settled over the seat and back, transforming the simple piece of furniture into a small nest of softness. The edges of the blanket pooled slightly over the sides, suggesting that anyone who sank into it would be welcomed, supported, held. The figure smoothed the fabric with a slow hand, feeling its gentle nap under the fingers. At the edge of the balcony, raindrops continued to gather along the iron railing. They clung to the delicate curves of the metal like a line of tiny stars, each one reflecting a miniature version of the city's scattered lights. Every now and then, a drop swelled to the point of release and slipped free, falling soundlessly into the shadows below. The ivy's leaves shivered softly as the rain brushed over them, their surfaces glossy and dark. The faint green scent of the leaves mingled with the smell of wet stone, and the lingering floral note from the blanket weaving a quiet tapestry of fragrances. The figure returned to the table, lifting the teacup once more. The liquid inside had cooled to a gentle warmth, its surface still and reflective. A faint ring of darker color lined the interior of the cup, tracing where the tea had once been higher. Another slow sip brought a milder heat to the chest, a comforting echo of the earlier warmth. The flavor had softened as it cooled, the sweetness more subdued, more delicate. On the table beside the cup lay a small, leather-bound notebook and a slender fountain pen. The notebook's cover was worn smooth at the edges, its color deepened by being held and opened many times. The pen, resting diagonally across it, held a glint of metal along its clip that caught the lamp's glow. The figure's hand brushed the notebook lightly, feeling the familiar give of its cover, the slight roughness at the corners where the leather had begun to soften with age. With unhurried care, the notebook was opened. The motion released the faint scent of paper dry clean with a hint of ink and time. The pages inside lay filled with neat lines of handwriting, though the words themselves did not call for attention. It was the simple presence of them, the record of thoughts once considered and then set down, that mattered. A blank page appeared, its surface smooth and quiet, waiting without urgency or demand. The pen was lifted its weight, settling naturally between the fingers. A quiet click as the cap was removed, then the faintest scratch as the nib made contact with the paper. Lines formed slowly, gracefully, unhurried. Perhaps they were reflections of the day, perhaps a description of the rain, or perhaps nothing more than shapes moving across the page. Content did not matter here. Only the motion, the rhythm, the soft sound of ink gliding over paper counted. Outside, the rain thickened for a few minutes, its voice rising by a small degree. Drops struck the awning with a slightly stronger patter, tiny splashes dancing along the edge before falling away. The mist above the street deepened, turning the lamps into hazier orbs of light. Yet, even in this brief swell, there was no harshness, only a fuller, richer note in the ongoing lullaby. Then, as calmly as it had grown, it returned to its gentler fall, a steady, soothing backdrop. The figure paused, with the pen resting lightly against the paper, listening. Inside the apartment, the ticking of a small clock on a distant shelf made itself known, soft, pressing like quiet footsteps along the edge of time. The sound did not intrude. It simply existed beside the rain, a reminder that moments were passing, even as they felt beautifully suspended. The balcony chair, now draped in the soft blanket, called with its own silent invitation. The notebook was closed with a gentle press of the hand. The pen returned to its resting place on top. The cup was lifted, carried carefully toward the doorway, its contents barely disturbed. Each step toward the balcony felt natural, inevitable, like moving deeper into the heart of the evening. The figure eased down into the chair, the blanket yielding like a cloud. The fabric welcomed the weight, cradling the body in softness. The wooden frame beneath offered quiet support, its solidity grounding and calm. The cup was set on the table within easy reach, the hand lingering for a moment as fingers traced the curved edge of the saucer. From this seated vantage point, the city revealed itself in a slightly new way. The rooftops appeared closer, their lines intersecting and overlapping in gentle angles. The rain was more easily heard as it touched the surrounding surfaces. The soft drumming on a nearby rooftop window, the almost musical tapping on an old metal chimney, the irregular beads of water dropping from an overhanging balcony one floor above. Each sound layered upon the others, creating a tapestry of gentle percussion. Across the way, a nearby window stood half open, its curtains drawn back. Inside, a shadow moved slowly, a figure placing a book on a table, then turning off a lamp to leave only the glow of a smaller light near the bed. In another window, a small plant sat on the sill, its leaves glossy and wide cupping droplets of water that had blown in from the rain. The city felt full of these tiny, tender scenes, each one quiet, each one safe. The air on the balcony carried a hint of something new now. From somewhere down the street, the faint fragrance of fresh bread drifted upward, a late batch baking in a nearby boulangerie. The smell was warm and comforting, mingling with the rain-cooled air in a way that made the night feel both crisp and deeply cozy. The rain continued to fall, but it seemed now to be wrapping the city in a soft cover rather than washing anything away. The figure rested back in the chair, letting the shoulders sink a little deeper into the blanket's embrace. A hand curled loosely over the armrest fingers, occasionally feeling the grain of the wood. The breath moved in and out, steady and slow, naturally aligning with the rhythm of the rain. A quiet thought drifted into awareness, not sharp or demanding, but gentle and spacious. It suggested that perhaps this, more than anything else, was what a sanctuary meant. A place where nothing needed to be fixed or arranged, where the world outside could go on in its many ways, while this small balcony remained a steady island of calm. The rain became not a barrier, but a soft curtain separating this refuge from the urgency of the day. The figure's gaze found the small droplets on the railing again, watching as they formed, trembled, and finally let go. Each one seemed to enact a tiny ritual of release. There was no struggle, no hesitation, only a natural falling when the moment was right. The sight carried with it a wordless understanding that letting go could be as simple as quiet as this. Within the hush of the Paris night, the balcony gathered all these impressions. The glow of distant lamps, the fragrance of rain and bread, the grain of wood beneath resting hands, the blanket's soft weight into a single seamless experience of comfort. The rain's embrace deepened, surrounding the small sanctuary in a sound that felt like a continuous gentle exhale. The city continued its slow turning beneath the clouds. But on this balcony, time had softened, stretching out into a long, peaceful moment. The sleep sanctuary had fully unfolded now, holding its quiet occupant in safety and ease. The rain had settled into constancy, a fine, endless rhythm that seemed to breathe with the city itself. Every rooftop, every window pane, every slender gutter carried its own note, blending into a low, seamless lullaby. The world outside the balcony no longer moved in moments or minutes, but in waves of sound and light, soft and cyclical, perfectly content to be. Inside the small apartment, the lamplight still glowed steady and unwavering. Its reflection trembled faintly in the window glass, a fragile halo surrounded by the silvered rain. The room behind the balcony had grown quieter, darker. Only the softest traces of amber remained enough to paint the edges of furniture and to give the space a tender, golden heartbeat. The cup of tea sat half-finished on the small table, the last bit of warmth hiding near its center, a fading echo of comfort. The figure in the balcony chair let the gaze wander without purpose. The rain's curtain created a world of abstraction, shapes and outlines, softened to suggestion, details blurred into texture. The rooftops became silver smudges. Street lamps melted into halos. The movement of a passing car was only the brief shimmer of wet light beneath, gone before it fully arrived. Every sound, every motion was muted and kind, as though filtered through layers of calm. A slow breath filled the chest, carrying the scent of rain and distant bread once more, now joined by something faintly smoky. Perhaps the smell of rain touching old stone, or of a candle that had burned low in a nearby room. The fragrance lingered gently in the air, grounding and ephemeral all at once. The lungs filled easily without effort and released the air even more slowly, as if the night itself were exhaling through them. From within the city, a faraway sound, maybe a violin played behind a closed window, drifted upward. The melody was faint, more memory than music, but its tones shimmered through the rain, tender and slightly wistful. The notes never fully resolved, nor did they need to. They hovered suspended in the same stillness that held everything else. The figure leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on the edge of the chair, fingers laced loosely together. Droplets clung to the iron railing before them, each one reflecting the lamp's golden glow. As the rain continued to fall, these droplets merged and separated in slow choreography, forming small rivers of light that curved along the metal surface. Watching them was enough. It was in these moments that the city seemed to reveal its hidden gentleness, a truth that daylight often concealed. By day, Paris moved with purpose, full of voices, footsteps, and the hum of intent. But under rain, under night, everything slowed, softened, and aligned itself with quieter rhythms. The architecture itself seemed to listen. The tall facades, the curved rooftops, the narrow balconies, they absorbed the rain's whisper and gave it back as resonance. The whole city became an instrument of stillness. Within this symphony, the figure on the balcony began to drift inward. Thoughts no longer formed as sentences, but as impressions, warmth, softness, reflection. A faint awareness arose of the body's gentle movements, the rise and fall of the chest, the slight rocking of the chair, the slow blink of eyes, half focused on nothing. There was no need for meaning. Only sensation mattered, and even that felt tenderly distant, as if experienced through silk. The blanket slipped slightly from one shoulder. A quiet hand moved to adjust it, fingers brushing the soft weave. The texture was thick, but yielding, each thread distinct yet harmonious within the whole. The fabric carried warmth like memory stored from moments before, shared back without hesitation. It felt like the touch of reassurance, simple humankind. Another drop of rain, larger this time, found its way past the awning and landed on the edge of the table. It splashed lightly, scattering into tiny silver points that caught the lamplight before vanishing. The figure's eyes followed its brief path, then returned to stillness. Every sound, even this folded into the steady pattern of the rain, a reminder of how easily the world continued, how naturally it found rhythm in repetition. A deep quiet filled the space between breaths. Within that quiet, something subtle shifted, not in sound or sight, but in feeling. The rain no longer felt like an outside element. It had become part of the same stillness that lived within the chest, as though the mind itself had found a way to reign softly, cleansing, cooling endlessly. The edges between the self and the night blurred. The air, the sound, the faint scent of wet stone, all of it became one shared pulse. From somewhere down the street, a gust of wind passed, brushing across the rooftops and through the alleyways. It reached the balcony as a soft caress, moving the linen curtains once more. They lifted gently, their folds catching the lamplight, appearing almost translucent for a heartbeat before settling again. The movement carried the faintest sound, a sigh, a whisper, as if the air itself were alive, breathing with the rain. The figure tilted their head back slightly, eyes tracing the edge of the awning above. Water streamed from it in delicate threads, each one breaking into droplets before disappearing into the night below. The pattern was mesmerizing, its repetition so perfect it could quiet any lingering thought. Time seemed to unravel beneath its rhythm, the idea of minutes and hours dissolving into simple being. In the apartment behind the clock ticked on, yet its sound felt softer now, further away, as though even time itself had decided to rest. Shadows deepened along the walls, gathering in the corners like folded fabric. The lamplight remained constant, but its glow had mellowed, no longer a bright center, but a steady ember. It gave the room a heart warm and steady pulsing faintly behind the veil of rain. The figure reached for the cup once more, now cool to the touch. Lifting it brought a faint reflection of the lamplight on its surface, a quiet shimmer of gold. The tea inside had grown faint, yet its taste lingered floral and soft, with a subtle sweetness that seemed almost imagined. The last sip left a thin warmth that moved slowly through the body, mingling with the coolness of the air, finding balance. Outside, the soundscape continued, rain, wind, an occasional drip echoing from somewhere unseen. Each layer blended seamlessly with the others until there was no single sound to isolate only one vast, enveloping presence. It was not noise, but texture, something that could be felt more than heard. The figure's gaze softened, unfocused, resting somewhere between the balcony's edge and the horizon of rooftops. The rain's glow reflected faintly on the skin. Tiny beads of light scattered across the arms, the fabric, the chair. The city's colors had shifted almost entirely to blue and gold. The blue of shadow and sky, the gold of lamps and windows still awake. Together they formed a palette made for rest. Another faint thought surfaced, not intrusive, only curious, that perhaps the rain did not fall on the city, but through it, through its spaces, its people, its silence, through its memories and its dreams. And maybe tonight, the same was true here, that the rain was passing through this balcony, through this moment, through the quiet of one listening heart. The idea lingered for a breath, then drifted away like mist dissolving in air. Within this calm, the figure reclined deeper into the chair. The body's edges softened, the weight gently distributed until everything felt held. The head leaned back. The breath slowed the rain's rhythm, aligned with the pulse. The balcony had become its own world now, a cocoon suspended in sound and light beyond time, beyond thought, perfectly still. The city below continued to shimmer under its veil of rain, unaware that somewhere above, a small sanctuary had bloomed from its quietest corners. In the hum of the water and the hush of the air, the night gathered all it needed to cradle one resting soul. The rain had entered its most hypnotic rhythm, now steady, unbroken, and endlessly soft. It no longer arrived as droplets, but as a single, continuous presence, like the quiet inhale and exhale of the night itself. The city beneath shimmered in silvery stillness, its streets wrapped in ribbons of reflected light. Every sound carried a softened echo as though distance and memory had become one. On the balcony, the figure remained half reclined, the blanket drawn close. The chair's gentle cradle seemed to match the body's breath, a shared, slow pulse. The teacup now sat empty, a faint circle of gold left at its bottom, where lamplight met glaze. A thin wisp of steam, almost invisible, rose once more from its surface, perhaps from warmth held deep within the porcelain, refusing to fade completely. Inside the lamp continued to glow like a steadfast companion. Its light cast quiet patterns across the floorboards, long shapes of honey and amber, shifting subtly with the breeze. The curtain nearest the door swayed inward and outward, brushing lightly against the frame with each movement, keeping time with the rainfall. The sound it made was no more than a whisper, a breath over linen, a secret exchanged between air and fabric. A small notebook still rested on the table, where it had been left open a single page, marked by the faint glisten of wet ink. The handwriting there looked almost like rain itself, gentle, fluid, unhurried. Each stroke of the pen carried its own patience, its own grace. The page had absorbed the faintest hint of moisture from the air, softening the texture of the paper, giving it a subtle living curve. The figure's eyes rested there for a while, though not to read. It was enough simply to see the traces left behind, the quiet proof of having paused long enough to write to notice to be. The rain outside seemed to echo that gesture, one drop, then another, each a small act of presence, collectively infinite. A cool breeze stirred again, bringing with it the deep scent of the city. Under rain-wet stone, metal, and earth mingled with faint traces of jasmine and pastry. Somewhere below, a door closed with a muffled thud, followed by the soft hiss of tires passing through puddles. The sound came and went like a sigh folding neatly into the texture of the evening. The figure shifted slightly in the chair, drawing the blanket closer around the shoulders. The movement released a faint rustle of fabric, a sound as gentle as the brush of pages, turning in a well-loved book. Beneath the blanket, the warmth grew more defined, a subtle, comforting contrast against the cool air that lingered near the balcony's edge. Raindrops gathered once more along the iron railing, small beads forming and merging, forming again. The lamplight touched them, turning each one into a droplet of fire. They trembled before falling, scattering the reflection into tiny fragments. Watching them fall felt like witnessing thoughts dissolve each drop, a gentle reminder that nothing stays heavy forever. The city's lights had softened even more. Windows that had been bright earlier were now dimmed or dark. Curtains drawn, candles extinguished. Across the street, the silhouette of a rooftop garden revealed faint outlines of leaves slick with water, their shapes outlined in delicate silver. Above them, the sky was no longer blue or black, but a muted gray, luminous and infinite. The figure's gaze lingered upward. Clouds drifted unseen, their presence marked only by the tone of light moving through them. The air felt alive, clean, electric, and still. A single drop escaped from the awning above, landing on the figure's wrist. Cool, perfect. The skin shivered slightly, not from chill, but from awareness. The simple purity of touch. Inside the room, the small clock continued its patient ticking. It marked not urgency, but continuity, like a heartbeat hidden in wood and brass. The lamp hummed faintly, a quiet note that blended with the rain's lower hum. Together, they created a harmony that seemed less like sound and more like the sensation of being safely awake within a dream. The figure's eyes grew heavier. The world had slowed into long, tranquil stretches of sound and scent and faint color. Each detail existed for itself, without needing to connect to any thought or story. The body's rhythm had aligned with the rain's, and both moved now with the same gentle certainty. A moment later, a small movement, fingers brushing the edge of the blanket, adjusting it where it had fallen loose. The texture was soft and slightly cool now, where the night air had touched it. But the warmth beneath quickly reclaimed its place. The figure leaned back again, the chair creaking ever so faintly, the sound blending easily with the rain. Across the way, one final window remained lit. Inside, a small lamp glowed on a desk beside a vase of wildflowers. Their petals, white, blue, and pale yellow, bowed slightly under their own weight, and the faintest flicker of shadow passed across them as the curtain moved. The scene lasted only a few moments before the light dimmed and the window joined the rest of the city in sleep. Now only the rain and the hum of the air remained. The figure's eyes closed halfway, catching flashes of lamplight through the lashes, blurring gold and shadow together. The senses blended to sound and scent and touch, becoming a single velvety awareness. In that merging, everything felt whole. Thoughts drifted again, light as breath, softer than words. They spoke not in language, but in quiet recognition that peace was not found in silence alone, but in the soft meeting of opposites, the warmth and the cold, the glow and the dark, the sound of rain and the stillness it creates. Balance discovered not by seeking, but by resting. A long sigh left the chest unforced and unmeasured. It rose into the air, mixed with the mist, and vanished. What remained was only ease, the simple grace of being alive within this gentle moment of the world. The lamp's glow grew dimmer, not from failing light, but from the rain's reflection overtaking it. Every droplet on the balcony shimmered like tiny mirrors, scattering the warm color across the tiles and into the air. The effect was soft and dreamlike, as if the rain itself had begun to glow. In that light, the figure appeared as part of the room, part of the rain, part of the night. A single steady breath marked time, slow, quiet, and rhythmic. The balcony, once just a space of stone and metal and air, had become something living, a pulse of calm, a haven of breath. The rain showed no sign of stopping. It fell as it had fallen before, eternal in its patience. And beneath it, the city and the listener and the night continued together, perfectly synchronized in their stillness. The night had deepened into its quietest hour. That delicate threshold when the world seems neither awake nor asleep, only suspended, a soft breath between one dream and the next. The rain continued, though lighter now, its sound finer, more intricate like silk, brushing against glass. Paris had grown hushed beneath its silver veil. The streets below, shimmering with reflected lamplight, and the slow movement of water along the stones. On the small balcony above it all, time had dissolved. The air was cool, carrying a clean scent of rain metal and faint jasmine. The figure sat motionless in the chair, the blanket drawn close around the shoulders. A quiet warmth still lingered within the folds of fabric, the last remnant of the lamp's gentle glow, the steady comfort of breath against cotton. The cup on the table sat empty, its rim traced with a thin ring of gold where light met porcelain. The lamplight from inside the apartment had softened to an amber haze. Shadows moved gently across the walls as the curtain swayed, and the soft ticking of the clock punctuated the silence like a measured whisper. Each tick was a reminder that time continued. Yet here on this balcony, time felt beautifully irrelevant. Everything that mattered was contained within the hush, the rain, and the steady rhythm of being still. The figure's eyes lifted toward the street below. From this height, the city looked like a constellation turned upside down. Points of light scattered across darkness, each one glowing with its own small purpose. A window opened 2 floors down, and a hand reached out briefly to bring in a forgotten towel. The motion was slow, drowsy, almost tender. Somewhere farther away, a car passed its tires, hissing over wet pavement, before the sound faded entirely. Above, the clouds shifted slightly. Their weight thinned, revealing small breaks through which a paler light glimmered, moonlight muted and diffused by mist. It touched the rooftops in a silver wash, tracing the lines of chimneys and rain gutters, and turning the puddles on the tiles into small mirrors. The light blended with the gold of the lamp inside, creating a quiet harmony between the cool and the warm, the outer and the inner. The figure leaned slightly forward, resting an arm along the blanket's edge. Fingers brushed the cool iron of the balcony railing. The texture was smooth but irregular, a surface shaped by years of touch of sun, of weather. Tiny droplets clung to it, still rolling beneath the fingertips like pearls. Each one carried a reflection of the world. The lamp, the sky, the rain itself, all compressed into a momentary universe of light. The thought arrived softly, almost wordlessly, that perhaps every drop of rain, every glint of reflection, contained a fragment of the same infinite stillness. Not emptiness, but presence. The quiet fullness that comes when nothing more is needed. A deep breath rose and fell, carrying the scent of wet ivy from the nearby wall. The leaves had grown darker now, saturated with rain, their surfaces gleaming faintly. Water dripped from them in slow intervals, each drop landing with a soft musical note on the tiles below. The pattern was irregular, yet somehow perfectly balanced. Within the apartment, the lamplight dimmed further. The room had become a chamber of shadows, soft, rounded, and golden. The books on the shelf, the framed picture on the wall, the folded throw on the chair, each held its own quiet dignity, bathed in the hush of the hour. The air carried the faintest trace of extinguished wick, as if a candle had been blown out somewhere nearby. The figure's gaze drifted back toward the rain. It had changed again, not in sound, but in feeling. What had once been the music of the city now felt like the sound of breathing, both outer and inner, seamless and whole. The mind no longer distinguished between what was heard and what was felt. Each drop seemed to echo within the chest, as though the rain and the heartbeat had aligned in a shared rhythm. Another sigh escaped, soft, natural, almost silent. It was not weariness, but release. The kind of sigh that carries no residue of thought, only the body's way of saying, enough, everything is enough. A thin thread of moonlight reached through the mist, falling across the balcony floor. It touched the edge of the table, the cup, the notebook, and finally, the figure's hand resting along the railing. The light was pale, almost silver blue, its texture so delicate, it seemed it could be brushed aside like a ribbon, but it stayed steady and calm, illuminating the droplets, still clinging to the metal, turning them into a string of tiny stars. The sight stirred something gentle within the figure, something close to memory, but without shape or name. Perhaps a summer long ago, a different rain, the same hush. Perhaps nothing at all, only the recognition of a timeless peace that returns whenever the world grows quiet enough to hear it. From far below, the faint chime of a church bell sounded the hour. Its tone was deep and distant, softened by distance and weather. The sound passed through the rain like a thread through fabric, one pure note, resonant and patient. It lingered for a moment, then faded, leaving only the rainfall to fill the silence again. Ouch. The figure's eyes closed fully now. Behind the lids, the world became an ocean of sound rain breath, the faint hum of lamplight. The body loosened further, the head tilting slightly to one side. The chair's wood creaked softly under the shift of weight, then settled back into stillness. A long moment passed, then another. Time drifted fluid and kind. The air pressed gently against the skin, cool and embracing. The rain continued its patient song, constant and whole. And in that unbroken rhythm, the mind began to slip into its own quiet sea. Not sleep yet, but the tender threshold before it. A place where thought and image dissolve, where sound becomes light and light becomes breath. The figure's final conscious sense was of warmth and rhythm, the heartbeat of the rain, the soft rise and fall of air, the pulse of the city breathing slowly through the mist. All of it weaving together into one infinite lullaby. The balcony, the room, the rain, all of it seemed to merge now into one endless continuum of stillness. The story no longer belonged to a place, nor even a person. It had become what the night always intended, a sanctuary without walls, a single vast breath held between worlds. The rain continued through the deep hours of night, so steady and so fine that it had become part of the silence itself. Each drop was softer now, almost indistinguishable from the hush of the air. The city lay beneath a silver veil, its rooftops glistening faintly in the moonlight that had managed to slip through the mist. Every sound carried a muted grace, as if the world had learned how to whisper. The balconies, small and steadfast, felt timeless. It stood like a quiet island, adrift above Paris, half shelter, half sky. The figure remained at rest in the chair, cocooned within the blanket's gentle weight, eyes closed, breath slow, head tilted slightly toward the open air. Around them, the sounds and scents of the night flowed like a river that asked for nothing in return. Inside the apartment, the lamp's glow had dimmed further, becoming no more than a single pool of gold surrounded by the cool darkness of the room. The edges of the furniture softened until they seemed almost to disappear. The clock continued its faint ticking, though even that sound seemed subdued, wrapped in the hush of the hour. On the small table, the empty teacup had cooled completely. Its surface now reflected the faint shimmer of the rain, beyond the golden light from inside, blending with the silvery tones of the street below. The result was a fragile mirror, alive with motion, yet perfectly still. A small droplet from the awning above landed in it, sending ripples across the reflection, a single disturbance that faded back into smoothness, like thought dissolving into calm. The figure's breathing remained, even the rise and fall of the chest, barely perceptible beneath the blanket. Each inhale brought with it the scent of rain-soaked leaves and cool metal. Each exhale mingled with the rhythm of falling water. It was as if the lungs and the rain had found the same tempo, two halves of one steady, infinite breath. The rain softened again, a whisper of a whisper now. What remained was the faint rustle of ivy shifting in the breeze, the occasional patter of a drop finding its way down the iron railing, the nearly inaudible sigh of fabric as the curtain moved. These sounds existed not as interruptions, but as threads in the same woven quiet. Beneath the awning, the figure's thoughts floated somewhere beyond words. There were no memories now, no expectations, only sensations, light, scent, texture, rhythm. The way the air touched the face, cool but kind. The way the blanket curved around the shoulders, forming a soft boundary between body and night. The way the chair cradled weight effortlessly, like a presence that understood what it meant to rest. Inside the lamp flickered slightly, not from instability, but from exhaustion, as though it too were drifting toward slumber. The faint buzz of its filament softened until it could no longer be separated from the rain's hush. Everything seemed to melt together, warmth and coolness, light and dark, sound and silence. The figure's mind wandered into half-formed images, dreams that felt more like sensations than stories. A hallway filled with light, a garden under morning rain, the soft, rhythmic sound of footsteps on cobblestone. Each image appeared, lingered, and vanished without leaving a trace, like ripples fading on still water. The city below continued to sleep. Occasionally, a window would flare with movement, the flick of a lamp being turned off, or the gentle motion of a curtain closing. But even these moments felt like part of the same rhythm. Everything was obeying the rain now. Even time itself had fallen into step. A breeze moved across the balcony, stirring the ivy along the wall. Tiny beads of water fell from the leaves, catching the moonlight before disappearing into the shadows below. The scent of damp greenery grew stronger, cool, and pure. It mingled with the faint memory of tea, forming a fragrance that seemed to live somewhere between earth and sky. The figure's hand slipped from the blanket, resting lightly on the chair's wooden arm. Fingers traced the familiar grains, smooth in some places, faintly ridged in others, the tactile language of wood that had weathered many seasons. The surface was cool now, touched by stray droplets carried by the wind. It felt grounding, like the steady heartbeat of the world itself. Another long, slow breath. Inhale, rain, night air, stillness. Exhale, release, warmth, surrender. The sound of the rain deepened again, though not in volume, more in presence. It was as if the city had vanished entirely, leaving only the rain and this small patch of space suspended above it. The sound filled every corner, not loud, but infinite. The kind of sound that did not occupy the air, but became the air. The moonlight brightened briefly as a gap opened in the clouds. It poured across the rooftops, painting them in shades of silver and slate. On the balcony, the droplets caught this new light and scattered it like tiny shards of glass. The world seemed to shimmer between waking and dream. The figure's face turned slightly toward the glow. Even with eyes closed, the brightness could be felt, a soft pulse through the eyelids, a ghost of light resting on the skin. For a moment, it felt like the moon itself had come to rest beside the balcony, content to share its quiet company. Inside, the clock chimed once a single low note. It rolled through the stillness like a pebble across water, fading quickly, but leaving a sense of depth behind. The figure did not stir. The body remained heavy and peaceful, anchored by the gentle rhythm that had become its world. The air cooled another degree. The rain grew lighter still. What fell now were not droplets, but mist, a fine, delicate veil that carried no sound, only sensation. It touched the skin like breath, leaving a trace of moisture that vanished instantly. The night had reached its quietest point, the place where even the sky seemed to rest. In this depth of stillness, the boundary between dream and waking dissolved. The figure on the balcony no longer sat watching the rain. They were the rain, the quiet continuation of its rhythm, the embodiment of its calm. No thoughts of morning came, no thoughts of ending, only the endless, now infinite kind, and softly alive. The lamp flickered once more, and for a heartbeat, the golden light and the silver moonlight mingled perfectly, creating a color that had no name, the shade of surrender. The chair, the blanket, the rain, the night all rested together in perfect balance. The hour had drifted far past midnight into that tender space where the world seems half dissolved in dream. The rain had softened to a mist so fine it no longer sounded like falling, but like breathing a continuous whisper that seemed to come from within the night itself. The city below lay washed and luminous. Every street, every rooftop gleamed faintly under the delicate sheen of moonlight filtered through clouds. Here and there, puddles shimmered like fragments of mirror, and the lamps that lined the streets glowed with a steady golden patience. Paris, wrapped in rain and silence, had never looked more like a dream made visible. The small balcony still held its quiet vigil. The figure in the chair had barely moved. Only the faint, rhythmic rise of breath marked the passage of time. The blanket had slipped slightly, draped loosely over the knees. Now its edge dampened by the fine mist. The hand resting on the chair's arm had gone utterly still, relaxed in the way only deep peace allows. Inside the lamp burned low, its filament humming a soft, steady tone that seemed to vibrate in harmony with the rain. Shadows had gathered thickly in the corners of the room, soft-edged and velvety. The clock continued to tick, though its rhythm had grown strangely gentle, no longer marking time, but rocking it to sleep. A gust of air drifted through the open doorway, stirring the linen curtains once again. They lifted and fell with the same slow grace as the rain. Each movement caught a bit of lamplight and scattered it like gold dust before releasing it back into darkness. The air it carried was cool, carrying the scent of stone rain and faint sweetness, the ghost of jasmine that still lingered from earlier in the night. The figure's head tilted slightly upward, and though the eyes remained closed, the faint awareness of moonlight could be felt, cool silver against the skin, a quiet contrast to the warmth cocooned beneath the blanket. The rain had become an extension of breaths, the moonlight an extension of touch. The boundary between the body and the world was dissolving into a single, continuous calm. From somewhere beyond the rooftops, the faintest chime of a church bell rose again. Its tone was round, low, almost hidden by the mist, yet its presence was unmistakable. A pulse in the air, a soft thread of sound that bound earth and sky together. The bell's echo lingered, stretching out until it became indistinguishable from the hum of the city's sleeping heart. In that lingering note, the figure's mind drifted still deeper. What had been observation? The rain, the light, the city now folded inward into sensation. The outside world no longer seemed separate. The figure's thoughts, heartbeat, and breath had synchronized perfectly with the pulse of the night. A soft reflection, stirred within, wordless, effortless, more felt than formed, that perhaps the secret to rest was not escape, but participation, to breathe with the world rather than apart from it, to join the rain's rhythm, the city's heartbeat, the moon's quiet watching, and find within that unity the stillness that waits beneath everything. The rain fell lighter still, like threads of silver silk, gliding through the air. The sound had become more texture than tone, more presence than pattern. Each drop carried the memory of countless others that had fallen before it, and countless more that would follow. In its continuity, there was something eternal. Inside the lamp finally began to fade. Its glow dimmed, surrendering to the cooler light of the moon. The last traces of gold retreated across the floor, leaving behind a silvery half-shadow that felt infinite. The flame of warmth was gone, but the air remained tender, as if the warmth had migrated into the night itself. The figure, eyes still closed, tilted the head slightly, as though listening to something more distant than rain. It was not sound exactly, but the absence of sound, a vast benevolent quiet that seemed to open behind the ordinary silence. Within it, everything slowed to the pace of eternity. A drop of water found its way down from the edge of the awning and landed on the railing. Then another, then another. Each one gathered the reflection of the moon in its curve, a tiny, glowing pearl, suspended for a breath before letting go. Watching even with closed eyes, the figure seemed to sense their falling, to know instinctively when each drop released itself. The ivy leaves along the wall quivered faintly, their tips beaded with moisture. The smell of rain-soaked greenery deepened, mingling now with the scent of cooling air and faint iron. The city's distant hum was barely there, a sleeping thing, vast and kind. Hush. The mist thickened for a moment, cloaking the balcony in a softness that felt almost tangible. The air itself seemed to hum, not with sound, but with texture, a faint vibration that filled everything it touched. The figure breathed in, and it was as though the night entered, fully flooding every quiet place inside with stillness. There was no longer a sense of where the body ended or where the world began. Everything, rain, air, warmth, memory, had blended into one endless continuity of presence. Even thought had become too gentle to be recognized as thought. The moonlight shifted once more, and through the thinning mist, a faint glimpse of stars appeared, no longer hidden, but veiled, scattered above the rooftops like distant promises. Their light was faint, yet piercing, a reminder that beyond even the gentlest clouds, brightness always waited. The figure stirred just slightly, a small movement of the hand, adjusting the blanket once more. The texture of the fabric under the fingers was almost dreamlike, soft, smooth grounding. The gesture felt like reassurance, a way of telling the self that all was well. And it was, entirely, silently, beautifully well. The rain had become a whisper, the air cradle, the night a single held breath before dawn's first exhale. In that moment, everything, the city, the balcony, the world, seemed to vanish into stillness, not as disappearance, but as fulfillment. The quiet was not emptiness, but completion. Every drop had fallen exactly where it was meant to fall. Every sound had arrived at the perfect time. All that remained was presence, luminous, infinite whole. The night was nearing its end, though time itself no longer felt like a movement forward, only an unfolding. The rain had grown delicate as breath, a thin veil of silver mist barely touching the world below. Every surface, the rooftops, the stone walls, the quiet railings shone with the sheen of completion, as though the rain had not fallen upon them, but through them, polishing the world back into stillness. The balcony rested in that stillness too. The figure wrapped loosely in the soft weight of the blanket remained reclined in the chair, face turned toward the horizon where the dark began to pale. The air held a faint, luminous coolness, that subtle change when night quietly yields to the first invisible hints of dawn. The sound of the rain had thinned to a soft pattering like the last thoughts before sleep. Inside the apartment, the lamp had gone out completely. Its glass was dim, reflecting only the faint blue-gray glow that filtered in from outside. The room itself felt suspended. Nothing stirred, not even shadow. Only the faint reflection of the streetlights flickered across the wooden floorboards, catching the soft curve of the empty teacup, the folded blanket, the closed notebook resting patiently on the table. A soft breeze moved through the open doorway. It touched the curtains, lifting them into one slow, fluid wave, then letting them fall again. The sound was barely audible, a whisper of fabric, a sigh of air. It carried with it a fragrance now gentler, clearer, the freshness that comes after long rain, mingled with the faint perfume of wet ivy and distant bread. The scent of renewal, quiet and clean. The city below began to shift almost imperceptibly. Somewhere in the distance, a car engine murmured to life. A single window opened, a lone bird tested the first note of morning. Yet none of it disturbed the peace. It was all part of the same slow reawakening, a sequence as natural as the rain's fall, as soft as breath turning into dawn. The figure's eyelids fluttered open slightly, not from restlessness, but from instinct, that gentle awareness that precedes waking. The world that met them was blue-gray and glowing, still half asleep. The moon hung faintly visible, pale and tired, drifting toward the horizon. The clouds, having shed their rain, drifted in long, weightless streaks. The balcony railing still gleamed, traced with beads of water that caught what little light there was and scattered it in miniature stars. The ivy along the wall dripped softly slower now, the last of the rain sliding down to meet the earth. The figure's gaze lingered there on the edge of the balcony where the droplets fell. Each one seemed to hold the story of the night, its hush, its rhythm, its quiet pulse. Watching them fall, felt like watching thoughts fade away, clear, inevitable, free. A small smile touched the lips barely there. Not joy exactly, but serenity. That subtle recognition that comes when nothing more is needed, when even thought has become rest. Tunasu, the first true light of dawn began to gather along the horizon. It didn't break. It bloomed softly, slowly, like warmth returning to a body after a long embrace. The rain ceased entirely, now leaving behind a sheen across the rooftops that mirrored the pale color of morning. The city began to breathe again. A pigeon cooed somewhere unseen. A window opened across the street, and the faint clink of porcelain, a cup being set down, floated up into the air. Life was returning, but carefully, reverently, as if not to disturb the night's lingering peace. The figure remained still, eyes half closed, watching light gather. The world looked gentler, now washed clean and forgiving. The city's edges had softened its noise, not yet awake. In this early hush, it felt possible to love everything: the stone and rain, the silence and sound, the endless becoming, and the endless letting go. The reflection of light across the wet railing shimmered, then slowly faded as the sky brightened. Inside the room, faint gold returned to the floorboards, no longer from lamplight, but from the dawn itself. The city's hum rose faintly. The heartbeat of another day, beginning yet still slow, still wrapped in morning's grace. The figure took one long, slow breath. The air was cool and new, touched by the scent of rain that lingered in every corner. The exhale came just as slow, releasing whatever fragments of dream or thought remained. In that breath, the night completed itself. Everything had come full circle. The rain had fallen and faded. The lamp had burned and dimmed. The world had turned from dusk to dawn, and through it all, one quiet heart had rested within its rhythm, watching, listening, being. The figure rose at last, folding the blanket slowly, almost ceremonially. The fabric was cool now, faintly damp at the edges. It was placed carefully over the back of the chair, as though to wait for the next evening's rain. The teacup was lifted and set inside the room. The movement stirred the curtain one last time, letting in the morning air, pure and feather-light. The city's colors shifted again, grays becoming golds, shadows dissolving into clarity. Birds began to call faintly from the rooftops. Somewhere below, a door closed gently, the sound barely reaching this height. On the balcony, only the last few droplets remained, trembling at the edge of the railing before falling to the street below. The ivy leaves glistened one final time in the newborn light. And in that quiet, everything, the rain, the city, the figure, the night seemed to whisper a single shared truth. That peace is not something found, but remembered. That stillness is not absence, but belonging. That the rain will always fall again, and with it, the promise that we may always return to rest. Marshmallow. The figure turned once more toward the horizon, where light was now fully awake, bathing Paris in a soft, pearly glow. A breath, a final glance, a silent farewell to the night that had given such grace. Then, slowly, they stepped inside. The door closed without sound, and on the balcony, the air remained fragrant, luminous, eternal. The rain had ended, the night had exhaled, and peace unbroken lingered like a soft echo of gratitude, carried by the dawn.
Taninas.
Sleep well, dream softly, and may the night hold you kindly.